Joining me from SoCal, it's a pleasure to have you on, is Don Winslow. His book's about to hit this series of 6 crime novellas. The Final Score is, of course, an inveterate bestseller, a chronic bestseller of crime fiction. You know him as the author and activist, the Cartel trilogy, The Force, Savages. You're a retired, lapsed military historian. I mean, you do a lot of things. Did that even encapsulate it, sir?
Yeah. Good job. Good job. I've never heard of myself referred to as chronic before, but okay.
Inveterate and chronic. And I will
I'll
say
accept
that
it. Yeah, as long as
it's
it's
a
not
foot.
invertebrate, I'm
No,
okay.
invertebrate. No,
Okay.
it's a footnote in your timeline. But you were this close, apparently, to adapting my book, Hotel Scarface, and then the pandemic happened, and the showrunners were flaky, and Hollywood is a very different beast right now. We're going to talk about that.
It is a very different beast, and yeah, I'm sorry about that. I mean, the pandemic, just shattered a lot of stuff. I had a book that came out on Tuesday, and the country shut down on Wednesday. So yeah, but we can always revisit it, man. So,
We should reunite the gang.
yeah.
Let me ask you about that to start with before you get into anything else. You're here in the second Trump administration, which is something that you fought with your activism and everything else in the 2020 campaign, and your personal money and your creative capital that you threw into anti-Trump videos, which really got their goat, which really even got you death threats, which got you a certain notoriety, and you had to be circumspect about where you did book events and the like. What do you think about the shape of Hollywood writ large right now? There's been a tremendous amount of disruption and destruction. If you look at Paramount taking over, what is it, Sundance, Paramount, the very open interference, what you see with CBS News, what you see with the Trump administration saying, for example, Amazon Studios greenlighting this very expensive documentary and theatrical release of the Melania doc. Mm-hmm. You really have one that's much more Trump friendly and Trump curious than the Hollywood that confronted him his first time around.
Yeah. Well, listen, let me address some of the earlier things of what you said first, if I may.
Yeah.
Because it's quite serious. Listen, I've always gotten death threats, right? I wrote about the Mexican drug cartels. I got death threats. I've gotten, since 2015, since I've been politically active on social media, gotten death threats. But with this book, unfortunately, the threats have accelerated, and are much more serious. So people have said they wanted to kidnap and rape me, have said they wanted to assassinate me, and so we've had to cancel all the public events on this book tour. Supposed to be at the 92nd Street Y, can't do that. The Grove in Los Angeles couldn't do that. Poison Pen, the iconic bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona, couldn't do that because, frankly, it's unfair to ask anybody in the public to share a risk. You can't do that. It's more to it than that. The videos that you kindly alluded to that have had tens of millions of views. My partner Shane Salerno and I, who do the videos together, fund that out of our pockets. We have never taken a penny from anybody. We don't monetize them. And the money that supports creating those videos comes from the sale of the books. So now, in what's coming up on the midterm elections, if you want to try to shut down those videos, what's one way of doing it? Shut down the sales of the books. And so canceling those appearances potentially cost hundreds of sales of those books. So
but isn't there also a Streisand effect to it?
Somewhat. Fortunately, let's hope. But that, I think, is the rationale behind this, and an attempt to silence us, to cancel us from the right wing, and to shut us down. It's maddening. It's infuriating. It's sad, but it's the country that we're living in now, and this administration, and the first time around, and even much more in the second time around, have been very blatant about trying to shut down opposition voices and people who don't approve of who they are and what they do, and so that's what's happening with me right now. And I think that generally we see a greater tolerance for this than we have in the past.
What was the threshold that we as a country crossed? You never imagined. It was always the province of the other, right? A Salman Rushdie and the fatwa put on his head.
I
And
know
then unfortunately,
Salman.
which was acted on. And you've seen it parodied in Curb Your Enthusiasm and other places. You see what happens in Russia with perceived enemies of the state, what has happened in Caracas, what has happened in Iran. People defenestrated. I actually looked up the literal definition of being defenestrated.
Yeah.
It's parody and dark, but it's actually really something happened where that was allowed and that was fair game sometime over the past decade.
Well, past decade, literally. Listen, when that guy came down the escalator to announce he was going to run for president, he told us who he was. And he's told us who he was for years and years. And it's mostly been based on lies, and it's been based on a lot of racist and nativist lies. How did his public life start? Condemning the so-called Central Park Five and wanting those kids killed, kids who turned out to be innocent. And then what was the next step? It was the birther lie against Obama, an African-American man, for which he's never apologized. What was the next lie? Well, there have been tons of them, but the next major lie is, the election of 2020 was rigged, which we know for a fact that it wasn't. And that's a lie that was a lethal lie that got people injured and got people killed. And everyone wants us to forget about January 6th. I haven't forgotten about January 6th, and I don't intend to let the public forget it to the extent, that I can. Now we have more lies, right? They're trying to tell us that in the case of these Minnesota killings, that we didn't see what we saw. Like January 6th, like we didn't see what we saw. That's an Orwellian kind of approach to this, to say, no, we're not at war. We've never been at war with East Asia. We're at war with Eurasia. No, we've never been at war with Eurasia. We're at war with East Asia. What you know that you think you don't know, but we do know. But this goes back to 2015. I don't know why we're surprised, because he's continually told us who he is, and he's actualizing it.
And when you talk about cartels and this administration's relationship with it, I get grief from sources in my book at pointing Marco Rubio's proximity to the Miami cocaine operation in the mid 80s. I mean, he was portrayed as this innocent Cuban-American teenager, earning extra money to go to Dolphins games. He was guarding a stash house for his uncle, Orlando Sicilia. And it's amazing. I'll say it's one of the great things in this country that within 40 short years, you could go from guarding a stash house in Miami to being the chief torchbearer against narco-terrorism in this hemisphere and plucking a Maduro out of a Venezuela in the name of interdiction.
I think one of the problems with Americans, of which I am proudly one, right, is we have short memories. We're famous for it. We, we just move on to the next headline, and we don't remember who people are, and we don't remember the last thing that happened, and it's a problem. Listen, it's an opportunity in some ways, because we do have the ability to move on and recover and move on from things, but it's a serious liability in the sense that we don't remember people's history. We don't remember or hold on to our, I know I sound kind of like a jerk here, but we don't hold on to anger. And we should hold on to anger about a lot of things,
Don, tell me about what happened to Hollywood, something that happened, transpired, clearly the pandemic, clearly the move to streaming, clearly the disruption of the cable dial, the cash cow of DVDs that came in. It used to be, it used to hold its own. These were fortresses. They could not be intimidated by a president, by rhetoric. But what you have seen, I think, in the fear and the disruption of Hollywood, if you look at Warner Brothers, Discovery, Paramount, if you look at the payment that Disney, ABC made to kind of silence, to win the president's ardor on something else in case it wants to do mergers and acquisitions, with something that Stephanopoulos said, if you see 60 Minutes, which was unthinkable, them bending to the will of a White House grudge. What shifted it? Was it a business model thing initially, or was it the transactionalism, the open transactionalism of the president who came in and, voiced an indignation and said, you could make it good by paying me?
I'm not an expert on the business of Hollywood. I'm really not. I'm a crime writer, and
But you've been quite a pipeline to Hollywood. I would say that you are one of those people out there, and the book comes out, and
yeah,
you have a golden ticket. You have a Willy Wonka ticket.
yeah, I kind of do. I don't know that it's a golden ticket. I think I have a very, very good agent. You know him, Shane, who works very hard on putting me together with quality people and having projects done in a quality way. To answer the question you asked, yeah, there's definitely a transactionalism going. Let's hope it shifts back. I see some sort of tectonic shifting over the past couple of days, based on what's been going on in Minneapolis. But this is an authoritarian regime, and that does tend to be intimidating.
What do you think about Paramount specifically? I mean, that there's these.
Listen, I don't,
You can't get into these things. I mean, these are the this is a problem. Is you have this multi-billionaire family which
yeah.
came in and bought that and now wants to buy Warner Brothers Discovery. And if you consolidate all of these studios, you
Sure,
can dictate what happens at CBS,
right.
what happens.
It's definitely
at
going
CNN.
it's definitely going to be a problem. But
I mean, we are afraid to talk about it because we could end up
Yeah.
applying for jobs at these places, or
I'm not, frankly,
blacklisting us,
not afraid to talk about it because my career's been my career, and I don't have anything to fear in that regard. It's like, I don't. But
But time out, Don. I mean, the books are published. These conglomerates, right? They have loss-leading book publishers. They have film studios. They have licensing operations and the like. And if you're nominally known as kind of radioactive or persona non grata, that is that I don't want to say unprecedented because it's been thrown out a lot before. We've seen that in the Red Scare.
We've seen it forever, right? I mean, you could write that story in Latin. You could write it in Greek or Aramaic. We've always seen that. Listen, I'm going to say what I'm going to say on social media. I'm going to say what I'm going to say in the public. My publisher's never given me a problem about it. I've never had a criticism. I've never had the Don, shut up and type, kind of comment. And that's my reality.
We're joined by Don Winslow. He's in Southern California. He's, of course, I call him the inveterate crime bestseller. The latest is The Final Score, 6 crime novellas. You obviously know him for the Cartel trilogy, The Force, Savages. His series of videos that came up during the 2020 election went super viral on YouTube and Twitter and the various channels. And he's back. I guess you were in light retirement in 2022. I mean, that's when I last saw of you.
Yeah, light retirement, interesting phrase. Listen, I stopped writing narrative fiction for a while to focus on the political, and did that with unhappy results, right? It didn't come out the way we wanted to. I don't regret it, by the way, for a second. I'm glad I did it. I'm glad we did it. We fought as hard as we could. And then I was in real retirement. I wouldn't call it retirement light, LITE, or however you want to spell that. But the story of this book just kept coming back and back and back to me. You know this feeling, I'm sure. Yeah. Where something just won't shut up and just keeps yapping at you. And it did. I became more and more engaged with it and realized, yeah, I need to sit down and write it.
So tell me about the backstory on the novellas.
That is the backstory of the novellas. Some of them were ideas that I've had for years. Some of them were fairly fresh. And I think, maybe I was kidding myself a little bit that I could go without writing, maybe not. But this idea, for instance, about a guy who has this sudden moment of violence, otherwise good guy, living this very average kind of life, a husband and a father. And then he has this one moment, just this one moment where he loses that control and it flips his life. It blows his life up. And then he has to make hard decisions, none of which are good decisions. There are no good choices sometimes. And that idea intrigued me. to the point where, yeah, once I got to know that guy well enough, know that character well enough, then I could sit down and write it.
It reminded me, though, and I'm not being an apologist for some of the January 6th rioters who came out and said that it was a momentary lapse of judgment, to just see themselves in that footage. And they did not want to come out for the reunion tours. They did not want to come out for the revisionism. They just wanted to kind of put it behind them because it was a moment of mania, or what they got sucked into something. There was a retired cop, clearly, who was on Mayor Bloomberg's detail. There was other people who suddenly, when you talk about that dalliance with violence, kind of Kubrickian reptilian mind violence, that's kind of what it reminded me of. And now there's this broader move to not even talk about what happened on that day.
Yeah. Listen, I don't buy it. The character I was writing about is literally a moment of violence, and it's something I witnessed years ago. It didn't happen, but it was on the edge of happening and could have happened, and I was writing about what could have happened. I don't think you can say I had this momentary lapse of violence if you travel to Washington, you participate, you listen to Trump's speech, and then you march all the way up to the Capitol, and then you decide to physically assault the Capitol. Please don't tell me that's on impulse. Now, there's a certain sort of mob psychology I guess you can get caught up with, but I don't think that is an excuse. I don't think that's exculpatory. And the fact that we don't want to remember January 6th, the reason they don't want to remember it is because it was criminal, felonious, wrong, and one of the most disgraceful days in American history.
Don,
and Trump doesn't want us to remember January 6th. But I don't see a sort of parallel between that and the guy I'm writing about in this book.
Take me to the Wayback Machine, because I'm curious about this. When I say, lapsed military historian,
the Wayback Machine, I've heard that phrase in a long time. Yeah.
So you studied this, and you were on the brink of working, in the 1980s with the State Department as a military historian. Can you tell me about your upbringing and schooling? And you're exceptionally well traveled abroad. Swaths of the globe.
Well, listen, nobody stamps your passport, speaking of traveling, to be a writer. You go to medical school, you're a doctor. You go to law school, you're a lawyer. That doesn't exist in our world, as you know. So I wanted to do things that were interesting while I was trying to be a writer, So I majored in African history for a BA, which makes you a hardcore unemployable. There is no career path from that. I go from majoring in African history to being a movie theater manager and then a private investigator in New York City. And then I went back to graduate school because all I was doing as a private investigator was, getting older and broker and hurt. Then I majored in military history with an emphasis on Africa. And so I was an expert. Now you all take your naps. I was an expert in the use of indigenous troops in counterinsurgency warfare, with an emphasis on Africa. So slightly specialized, and was supposed to go in the State Department, had been accepted and all of that. It was during the Reagan years, and I didn't want to do it. I saw the stances we were taking in the world. I couldn't agree with that. I couldn't get with that. A buddy of mine had started this little photographic safari firm in Kenya, and had grown just to the point where he needed a number two. I'd been in Africa. I knew some of the languages. I had the bush skills, from the military history stuff. And so I chucked the State Department career and became a safari bum.
Were you taking a lot of Malarone and tripping on the anti-malarial stuff?
Yeah, but I ended up I got malaria anyway, by the way. Which was part of what launched my writing career, actually. I was sitting outside of a tent by the fire, 4:30 in the morning, because you get up early to get everything ready for the clients. And I had a malaria relapse and amoebic dysentery. And I'm sitting there by this fire quivering, right? And I weighed 96, 97 pounds or something like that. And I remember literally thinking, man, you better get serious about writing if you're going to do it, because, you you could die out here. And I had remembered Joe Wambaugh, who later, the late great Joseph Wambaugh, later became a friend. I'd heard him on a radio interview that when he was a murder cop here in LA, that he wanted to be a writer, and he determined to write 10 pages a day. And I was sitting by that fire thinking, I can't do 10, but I can do 5. And I started to write 5 pages a day. And
so those were literally and metaphorically lean years. I think about the New York PI years,
yeah.
and then, you nearly on death's doorstep with dysentery in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah, yeah. And I, 2 months later, was transferred to China. So I flew to Chengdu, China, to start leading hiking trips up in the mountains of Western China, chasing pandas around and stuff. And
what made you qualified to do that? Just a curiosity to get out there, that you had nothing to lose, that you could pack your life into a suitcase or a backpack?
Yeah, pretty much. I got engaged on one of those safaris in Africa, and then instantly left for China. Without my fiance, by the way, still my wife, 40 something years later. What qualified me? Nothing really. I think what made me do it though was a sense of, I want adventure. I want to see the world. I want to see as much of it as I can. And I didn't have money. I couldn't do that as a tourist. I didn't come from money. So I always had to find jobs that would let me do that, and that would let me do that, and so when they said, hey, do you want to go to China and, lead people up and down these mountains? I knew how to lead hiking trips. I could do that. And so I went, yeah, absolutely, sure. Would love to do it.
So I know we get into the nitty gritty. This is, after all, full disclosure, but were you at the same time trying to file copy proposals to Nat Geo, to other places, to try to get that clip file? I mean, I get approached a lot about the inception of an author. How do you break through?
Yeah, there was no such thing in those days. If you were going to write for, on your travels, you were writing for National Geographic or some of those magazines. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't have the education or the knowledge to know how to do that. So I was trying to write novels. I was writing my first book, A Cool Breeze on the Underground, on yellow manuscript pads, on trains and planes and buses and monasteries. Where we used to stay in China. The only place to stay, these areas were so wild, were Buddhist monasteries. And so I'm trying to write crime fiction about a young guy, hunting a runaway in London while I'm in Kenya and China and all over God's little acre.
And so what was your big break? And timestamp this for me. Was it the mid-'80s?
Oh, much later than that. I think Cool Breeze came out in 1991. But I wrote 7 more books before I could quit my day jobs. And even then, it was dicey until probably a book called The Cartel. And that kind of busted me out,
But Cool Breeze, I mean, here you have this yellow dog-eared manuscript that's been on trains, that's been in monasteries, that's been on, it sounds like a Rush song, Passage to Bangkok. And
yeah.
Who looked at it? You have to there has to be, in my experience, there has to be somebody, an influencer, a lever, or someone who agrees to take a look at it and said, kid, give me a distillation of 700 words or something, and maybe I'll get this to an editor or a publisher.
Yeah.
Or am I superimposing my experience,
No. Well, first of all, there were no influencers in those days. That role didn't exist, But no, it was a part-time agent who was, I forget what position she was at a publishing house, and she sent it out to 15 publishers, all of whom rejected it, including the publisher I'm with now, which is kind of fun. And finally, St. Martin's Press took a chance on it and gave me a 2-book contract for $15,000, so $7,500 each for a book. Look, I came home from China so broke, I pawned my binoculars, which for a safari guide, that's your tool. That's it, right? Your binoculars. I pawned them to buy spaghetti for us to eat, right? That's how broke I was. and then and then I managed to find more work, and we managed to buy more groceries and things. But it was a struggle. Yeah.
Where do you come from that's okay with you, that wasn't crestfalling enough for you to say, I'm getting out of this, I'm becoming a publicist?
I don't know, man. I always knew I wanted to do this, right? And I knew from reading about it that it wasn't going to be easy. I knew all the stories, and all the struggles. I think a certain kind of stubbornness takes over. I remember when the book was getting rejected by everybody and his dog, that I read a statistic, and the statistic said that out of every 10,000 people who put writer down on their tax form, one makes a living at it. And I remember saying to myself, and this is insane, I said, I am legitimately sorry for the other 9,999, but in this life, that's my slot.
It sounds like a very Kurt Signetti thing to say. I mean, I'm time-stamping that as to where we are, but full disclosure, we're with Don Winslow. Please do stay with us. Full Disclosure runs on NPR, Spotify. You can watch us on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts, the whole 9 yards. All the links are at fulldradio.com. Again, fulldradio.com. A shout out to our radio listeners on WVTF, Radio IQ. We're on WPVM in Asheville, North Carolina. Out in Ventura, we are on KPPQ. Holler if you too would like us on your air. And catch me every week on both CNN and NPR's Here and Now. If you're just joining us, my esteemed guest is Don Winslow. I say he's a chronic inveterate crime bestseller. Obviously, we're going to get into the breakthrough of the Cartel trilogy, but dropping in right now in January of 2026 is the final score, 6 crime novellas, and we'll also discuss his activism. I do want to briefly get into how you broke through with the Cartel. And how you went back, and in spite of the odds and the meager mini advances and everything, went back to the drawing board and said, I'm going to come back bigger and badder.
Yeah. Listen, I spent 6 years writing a book called The Power of the Dog, right? It's the first of what became a trilogy. And this is part of the question you're asking, because it was never intended to be. Mm-hmm. It sold 8 copies, I think, because my mother bought one, It did very well overseas. It did not do well here. And then I went on, I wrote some other books, and along in there somewhere, Shane Salerno and I did a TV series together and became good friends. And then he started to kind of advise me. And then one day we thought, let's do this thing. Let's make it formal. I was his first client. I was the crash test dummy, and he turned things around. But one thing that he did is he kept saying, will you write a sequel to Dog, Power of the Dog? And I firmly said no. I used to hang up on him. He'd call up and say, hey, well, how about writing us? And I'd pretend to be a pizza parlor, and I'd say, pepperoni 20 minutes, when I'd hang up. But finally, he persuaded me to write what was currently then happening in Mexico in a fictional sense, because things had gotten so much worse than what I'd written about in Power of the Dog. I never dreamed in my worst nightmares that things could get as violent as they did. And I was hesitant to re-enter that world. But at Shane's urging and my own maybe sense of guilt, if you will, that I thought I could tell the American public what was really happening.
Well, before that, tell me about Shane. What did Shane see in you? What was the breakthrough conversation in that? I mean, that the overture to do TV together. He just saw what he saw: hunger. He saw this franchisability. I don't mean to be mercenary about it.
Yeah, I don't think it was a mercenary thing. We were friends, liked each other. Shane's like a brother to me, right? I think, and you'd have to ask him, right? But I think what he saw was an underrated writer getting knocked around in the publishing world and getting knocked around in Hollywood. And Shane is an underdog kind of a guy, Shane sticks up for the underdog and will fight very hard, not just in writing, in a lot of areas, It's one reason I love him. And I think he saw that. And I think, immodestly, that he saw talent. I hope that's what he saw.
And so back then, I mean, let's timestamp this to the mid 90s.
Yes, yes.
There was a Hollywood industrial complex kind of profit. We're talking peak TV. We're talking adaptations. They'd cover you. The studios were the studios. You had theatrical runs. You had no small screen disruption. Netflix was not even a twinkle in anybody's eye.
Sure.
So this could subsidize kind of loss leading efforts. You know, the writing, if to the extent that you were dual tracking with Shane and doing some TV writing and other stuff, it also built up your profile and made a book much more likely to catapult to, you know, Hollywood treatment because it's so unfamiliar to today's authors and showrunners and the like. Tell us about that era.
If I remember it, you know, a long time ago for me as well. Look, again, I'm not a Hollywood business guy. You know, I'm a crime fiction narrative writer. One of the great freedoms that Shane provided to me was the ability not to think about those things. I just trusted him, right? He said, yeah, you want to do this? Or I said, I don't know who came up with the idea first. I really don't. And by the way, we've never had a contract. And I'd like to say we had a handshake deal. I don't know that we ever shook hands over it, right? But what he allowed me to do was to concentrate completely on writing and forget about the rest of it. And he took it over and he turned it around. You know, I was getting screwed on foreign publishing deals. He straightened those people right out. Right? You know.
Who even gets a career rabbi like that? I missed out, man. I missed out.
Yeah. You know? So I was able to, I mean, Cartel's a big fat book.
Yeah.
Right? That took years to write. You know, it sounded like Paperback Writer, right? It took me years to write. Won't you take a look? One of my favorite songs. But so Cartel comes out now with Shane as its agent. And he just pushed it hard and relentlessly and pushed the publisher to publicize it and, you know, used his media connections and all of that to get the word out. And then coincidentally, and I think it's a relatively minor point, but El Chapo escaped, I think, 3 days after the book came out.
You know, that people motorcycle tunnel underneath.
Yeah, which is bullshit. He was never in that tunnel. People actually accuse Shane of arranging for the escape. You know, there was some famous meeting at Knopf where they had Shane on the phone and were accusing him of getting Chapo out of prison, which I don't think he did. So,
talk about mercenary. That'd be a great story.
You know, but
Shane is that powerful. He got El Chapo out of prison.
Obviously, we're joking. You know, for the record. You know, so that that kind of broke me out, and then sort of right around that era, I'm not sure I remember the chronology correctly. I had written a book called Savages, and it's funny. It's another Shane story. I wrote the first 20 pages as an infamous first chapter to that book, which I'm probably not allowed to quote on NPR. It's a 2-word chapter. The second word is you, and the first word isn't. I think I wrote, 20 pages or something. I don't know. And I emailed them to Shane, and I said, either I'm crazy or this is really good, but it's one of the two. And about 40 minutes later, I get an email from him saying, drop everything else you're doing and write this.
And it was such a frenzied screen adaptation. I mean, an all-star studded. I mean, you got an ensemble cast for that, but it was a mile a minute. It was erotic. It was super violent. It was glossy. And I always wondered how much control you had over that.
Well, Shane and I wrote the screenplay, but ultimately control is with the director. It was with Oliver. You know, that's the truth. That's the reality of film.
With Oliver Stone, yeah.
Yeah, as we know it, you know. And so between Cartel and Savages, and it was Shane who, again, drove that, got Oliver and that film was made. They were shooting, I want to say, in less than a year and a half after the book came out, which is extraordinary, right? It's just talk about fast paced, right? That was a fast-paced thing. And so, I think that's when I began to get a bigger audience. And then we started the run of the 8 straight New York Times bestsellers and all of that.
So if I could ask you, when did you consciously recall no longer being impoverished? There's the famous $37 in your pocket story. I won't repeat it here again, but you're pawning your binoculars to buy spaghetti.
Yeah. Absolutely. I don't know that it's hit me yet. Listen, I make good money. We don't worry about money anymore, and I haven't pawned anything in a long time. Again, thanks to Shane. But I don't know that there was a moment. Do you know what I mean? There have been some substantial checks that have arrived, but I don't remember this. Kind of, yeah. Sorry, I'm a little tired.
It's all right, Don. That's fine.
One moment.
In the final stretch of this show, I want you to describe this moment, okay, right ahead of a midterm election where it's perceived that Donald Trump is going to sustain losses, maybe like the blue wave of 2018. But there are bigger issues at play. There's unilateralism. There's what just happened in Venezuela, I guess, in the name of narco intervention. There's a potential operation in Iran. I mean, what happened with Maduro, to say that that's unprecedented? I mean, I know you studied Panama. We both did with Manuel Noriega. But then to run the country overtly on behalf of refineries, on behalf of multinational oil companies, I think there's something admirable, the fact that he stepped forward and said, we're going to take the oil, we're going to take the money. It's almost this naked transactionalism. He's not claiming, he's not holding up a torch for democracy and
Oh, to say the least. I think that you have a wonderful sense of understatement when you say he's not holding up the torch for democracy.
But isn't there something refreshing about
actively
that?
No,
but Don, there's no more burlesque to this, that we're there for the oil. It's not something
I think
Bush 1 or Bush 2 would have said.
Sorry. I think there's a lot of burlesque here. I think that there's so much performative art that's going on with this administration that it beggars belief. Listen, I know what you mean. That the guy comes out and nakedly says, "Yeah, I'm doing this for the oil." I guess that there's if you want to say, a refreshing sort of candor about that. Fine, but 40 some odd people were still killed in this thing. And we tend to forget about that. For instance, with these boats, right? Drug trafficking is not a capital crime in the United States. So what legal justification do you have for killing suspected?
You talk about the Orwellian terms, and I always thought that was going to remain in the province of pure fiction. But narco-terrorism, when they talk about continental narco-terrorism, you see Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, when you've actually depicted these people in Minnesota as terrorists, it does make it easier to justify in that split second in your head, if you're looking at the headlines, as, they were taking out terrorists.
Yeah, until you look at the footage, right? And then I would ask you, which side is wearing black masks and balaclavas? That's the costume we usually associate with terrorists. The last time I saw people in black masks gunning people down in the street was Juarez, Mexico in 2010. And there were narco-terrorists doing it. So, it's gotten so absurd, and my fear is that we're in what I refer to as chaos fatigue. I have so many people I know who don't want to look at the news anymore, don't want to read newspapers, because it's Act 4 of Macbeth. Each new day, new widows howl, new widows mourn, new babies howl about what's happened that day. And so you go from absurdity to horror to absurdity to horror. You wake up and you have the President of the United States talking about invading Greenland because Norway didn't give him the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, I don't know if he wanted the Peace Prize for January 6th, if that's what he thought he should get it for. But as it comes out of my mouth, it sounds so absurd that you think the alarm clock's going to ring and you're going to
What about
roll over.
absurdity fatigue? What about, I'm thinking of when he was talking about developing Gaza into a luxury waterfront thing. Maybe in his mind, he's thinking, I'm trolling the various parties out there into getting their crap together and figuring it out on their own. Or else we could all turn this to my developer friends in South Florida. I mean,
Yeah,
there's a very
of course.
high level trolling that he does say with a straight face. And maybe Greenland is one gigantic troll, even though real things are happening in the world, even though Iran has sustained this massacre, even though Venezuela, various things are happening, that this is hogging the world stage at Davos. To him, it's this big troll.
Right, because he's never really interested in anything that goes beyond the tip of his own nose. That's the truth behind the guy, right? He's a venal narcissist and is just interested in monetizing the presidency. And that's really it. And I think we have to look at the real possibility that he's a madman.
Where is this going to go?
Don't know.
I mean, you can, and I'm sure many people have told you this, like just what, when they used to tell LeBron and others, just stay there and dribble, or they would tell...
shut up and type is what I call it.
Shut up and type, or who was the great writer for ESPN who's gone off and she's with the
Yes, right
now.
Yeah.
Just stay in your own lane and do that. There is this part of you that you have seen hardship in your life. You've seen self-doubt. You've worked really hard. You can just chill out and walk on the beach and be in SoCal. After all, the Republic of California is the fourth biggest economy on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Gavin Newsom is this foil to this person.
Right.
Relax, Don. Learn to stop worrying and love the autocracy.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. Listen, I wasn't raised that way. My old man was on Guadalcanal when he was 18 years old with the Marines, right? This is not the country he fought for. This is not what he would want, right? And I was raised with enormous respect for the country. I was raised in the American military, right? I can take you to the exact spot in Fredericksburg, Virginia, where my great-great-grandfather was killed fighting to end slavery. I can take you to the spot, right? If these white supremacists want to talk about blood and soil, I can talk about blood and soil, right? My father's people came over on the Mayflower, so they were immigrants, right? So, yeah, listen, I love walking on the beach, man. I do it a lot. I would love to just sit in the sun and read books and relax and enjoy the fruits of my labor, to employ a cliche. We don't get to choose the times that we live in. That's not given to us. So these are the times that we live in. And so I think it's our responsibility to act, to speak out, at the very least, to speak out and fight this authoritarianism and this anti-democratic movement, this nativist, racist, corrupt. The great underreported story, is the corruption in all of this. This guy eats with two hands, as my mob associates would say, right? Grab, 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 grab. And so, yeah, listen, I'd love to, grab a drink and sit on the beach and read crime novels, all day. Yeah, let me do that. But that's not the time that I was given.
Are there those who, when they talk to you, your contemporaries in writing, maybe other people who've chosen to kind of hang low during this period, that it's kind of a fever type thing? It's going to break. It's self-limiting, like that malaria dysentery that you had, and thank God you recovered from when you were in the bush?
Yeah, and I wonder if people thought that in the 1930s in Germany. Oh, that's my answer. Yeah, maybe. Maybe it does, but is that a chance you want to take? Maybe it breaks and maybe it gets worse. Again, so many people say, I couldn't have imagined how bad it's gotten. Well, yeah, you could have. we've been talking about this since 2015. I called Donald Trump a fascist in 2015. So this has been going on 11 years, of the incredible damage he's done to this country and to the psyche of this nation, and to our relationships with each other. And so I don't want to say, well, yeah, maybe it'll pass. It hasn't passed in 10 years. And if we take the attitude it's going to pass, we give him more and more license to just run riot and do whatever it is he wants to do. But when we stand up, you notice he started backing off, since Minnesota, no stupid pun intended, went south on him. He's trying to distance himself from that. No, Trump, you've put your name on everything else. Your name goes on those killings. Thank you very much. But no, I can't just sort of sit back, I think.
Close us out, Don. Tell us about this book tour. I mean, has it gone completely virtual now? We have tools at our disposal that we've perfected during the pandemic. I mean, you and I are doing this interview over Riverside. I'm agnostic. Right. I don't live far from Fredericksburg, by the way. I can visit.
Oh, right. That's right.
The ancient family land. But you're in SoCal. And we
Caroline and Hawk Street. If you go to the corner of Caroline and Hawk Street.
Caroline and Hawk Street. I'll remember.
That's where my great-great-grandfather was killed.
You can do this virtually now. You can do this virtually now.
Sure.
I mean, it's frustrating. You do want to be there. You want to be at the Strand. You want to be at the 92nd Street Y. You want to go to.
Man, I've wanted to be at the 92nd Street Y my whole career. It's iconic. But you were starting to ask a question, and I rudely.
And you literally do not feel safe enough to go to the Upper East Side.
It's not that I don't feel safe enough. It's that in a public gathering, you can't protect everybody. Okay? I don't have the right to say to people, you should take that risk, or especially not have the right to withhold that information from people. Right? To say, oh man, I've been getting these threats, but screw it, I want to be at the 92nd Street Y.
You always have to travel over the past 10 years with like an extra bead of sweat on the back of your neck. Like
it's not sweat. Yeah, not really. I'm not scared, but it's definitely changed. I mean, when I do make a public appearance, sad to say, I'm more aware of who's in the room. Definitely, But do I walk around scared or sweaty? Nah.
Still waiting for you to do the event in Winslow, Arizona. I'm sure you get this a lot. If there's a sign on the road, a mile marker or something.
I have gone to Winslow, Arizona, and had a picture of myself taken in front of that statue. Yes, I was standing on a corner in Winslow, Arizona.
In the Eagles. The Eagles, regulars at the Mutiny, the hotel that in another life you and Shane would have adapted the book. We could have spanned. We could have had a great life together, Don Winslow. I almost knew you.
All right. Well, it's not over yet, man, right?
Thank you, Don. I appreciate it. It's great to be able to do this. And give us the particulars, the social media stuff, and where and when you might be on the digitals.
Don Winslow Twitter, donwinslow.com. Come see me and listen. It's thrown this all into very fluid situation about where I'm appearing and all of that. But I'm around. You can find me.
Don Winslow, author of so many unrepentant crime bestsellers. The latest is The Final Score, 6 crime novellas. Don, you're always welcome on the show. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, man. Nice to see you.
Full disclosure, special thanks again to Ian Stewart. If you are listening to us on the radio, note that while we cut for broadcast, the entirety of every interview is on podcast, whether on the NPR app, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Find them all at one neat link, fulldradio.com. Again, fulldradio.com. And recommend us to a friend. And catch me on both CNN and NPR's Here and Now. I'm Roben Farzad. Thank you for listening. Back with you next week.